Aaron.
How do you want to try it first?
That's right.
Try it first with the signs?
Let's start signing.
Okay.
And we'll see how that works.
See how that succeeds.
Succeeds. Nice. Yeah. So you all recognize, how do you say? You all know Aaron, but you maybe haven't heard him yet. So now, but we got all these questions from our service and our videos about ASL and how you've learned it and this sort of thing. And so this video is to answer those questions. So for you, you can talk and answer at the same time. Now you're translating the questions. All right. Thanks, by the way. Maybe I'll start by saying thanks for, all your work here at church, and especially the ASL, and your signing of the service videos. And every week, I don't know if I should tell you this more often, Aaron. Every week I get emails, and people are complimenting your signing, and especially as they compare like all the governors warning people of hurricanes. And that's what they're used to, the interpretations there, and they say, boy, you're lucky to have Aaron. That's great. All right, so we have 117 questions, maybe not that many. I got 15 questions for you. So let me see if I'm gonna try to ask you the questions, and I'll try to sign them and see if you understand. Okay. Hands or your arms get tired when you're signing? Do your hands and arms get tired when signing? Is that?
So that was pretty good. You're learning ASL. Yes, the hands and arms can become tired when you're signing, but most often it is the mental work of translating, working in two languages simultaneously.
How important? Let's see. How?
Can I add something to that?
Yeah, of course.
So most of the time in various settings, interpreters will work in teams of two people, and those two will take turns, usually around 20 minutes. Sometimes it depends on the range of the vocabulary, called the register. If it's a real high register, and then there has to be more thinking involved during the interpretation. And so the interpreter who's not actively interpreting in front of everyone will feed signs to the one who is if they miss something or if their thoughts start lagging behind. And then the other reason is to give the one who's active a break. So they'll take turns, and it gives each other sort of a mental and physical break.
So this is another. Who's easier?
Easier?
Who's easier to interpret for, me or Pastor Mitwitty? D.E.
Well, it's interesting. When an interpreter meets a new person for the first time, maybe they don't have the knowledge of that person's habits, mannerisms. And so, since I've worked with you more, probably you're a little bit easier now. Also, Mitwitty likes to throw out a lot of these popular culture references in his speaking. So sometimes that can, catch you unbalanced.
I think that you're learning my preaching better than I am, so that if I forget what I'm going to preach, I can just look and you can sign it before I preach it. Okay, third question now. How important are facial cues? That's right, important are facial cues in signing?
Well, I know a little bit about that, but not super deep. I never had interpreting college classes for myself. I picked up the language from people in the community, and my facial expressions sort of came naturally to me. And people have sometimes commented on how natural and how good they look, but I don't often do it intentionally. But there is a grammatical communication that happens in the face.
Like what's an example? Like a furrowed brow is a yes or no question, or
and that's the part that confused me because I never had the classes. But yeah, raising your eyebrows, it can show that it's a question, and it can also show what kind of question, and that's the part that would get me stuck in trouble with other interpreters.
No, that's okay. That's okay. Is ASL very standardized? What's standardized?
ASL is pretty much standardized here in America, and that's what the A in ASL is for, is American Sign Language. They have regional variances in signs. Like in some states they use football, other states football, and
Like a different accent almost.
yeah, they're regional signs, and so if you see someone signing that, oh, I know where you're from.
It's nice. What about that? So what about theology? Theology. Is it standardized for theological vocab words, or is that different?
Well, you happen to have written the book on American Christianity,
Yeah.
and so you know that different denominations will use the same word in different ways.
Yeah.
And so, yes, in the Lutheran Church, it's important to understand the Lutheran meaning of those particular words.
Like so, we've talked about baptism. So we would use the sign baptism.
We use the sign water sprinkle baptism. Someone from the Baptist denomination would use baptism for immersion.
So that's death. So so baptism is coming up and under like that. So that's we've talked a lot about what sign we should use for righteousness, right? And that's a big one too. So you gotta, because you're pouring the meaning into the sign when you do it. So we use the word for righteousness now to
righteousness, right clean.
Right clean.
Yes, because our righteousness comes from God, and He has made us right in relationship with Him and cleaned us from our sins.
So along these lines, is ASL more standardized for concrete subjects than abstract ideas?
It is easier often for interpreters, especially, I think, to communicate in the concrete because it's a visual language and you can show things on your hands that are visible. But also, when you're discussing other subjects, you can discuss abstract concepts, but you have to describe them maybe a little bit differently.
This is a similar question. It's related to that. Are there parts of the service that are more difficult? More difficult to sign?
Hymns often are difficult. The poetic parts of the liturgy can be, as a document, as kind of standardized text. You can develop sort of a standardized signing system, and my wife and some other deaf Lutherans are working on a liturgy translation project.
Yeah. That's nice.
And so hopefully when the parts of the liturgy get posted online, they can be helpful for interpreters, especially who have never interpreted at a Lutheran church, to understand the concepts that are deep and embedded in the liturgy. But poetic language is usually difficult because ASL has its own style of poetry that is visually based instead of rhythm or
Rhyme, things like that.
Rhyme based, yeah.
And it's also different. I mean, to sign together with people versus to speak together with people. It's a different phenomenon altogether that has to be considered. Oh, okay. I'm going to go to this next question. Does it help you if the speaker starts into an idea? Quickly to establish what's coming next, and then slows down a bit to give you time to shape your ideas? I think this is more of a suggestion for my preaching than it is a question for you. What's easier? Is it, or what's hardest to translate or easiest to translate for you when someone's speaking? How much does speed matter?
Speed, well, ASL and English are two different languages, and I tend to use closer to ASL grammar in my interpreting than English grammar. But there's a whole range of interpreting. One of them is called C, which is signed, and I used to know I think it's signed because you're indicating past tense.
Yeah.
Or signed because you're indicating, the D suffix of the word. But signed exact English. And I never was really skilled at that. I could use it a little bit. I've forgotten most of it. But often that will use letters, or they call them initialized signs. So this is a sign for college, and I signed before abstract. It's also kind of related to above. And so an abstract idea is one that's not on the ground. Right, it's abstract, and I initialize that with the A.
Right. This has to do with, so I think you can carry on with that answer with this next question, because it has to do with the grammar.
I kind of lost the question.
No, that's all right. So because you are moving into a totally different grammar with ASL. I'm not signing very well.
Most of the time.
I'm forgetting to use my sign. Okay. The grammar.
Well, I actually go back to the last.
Oh, so the other was, what was easier to translate?
Easier to translate. Oh, if someone gives you the idea first,
right,
and then time to catch up. So I've seen people who are very, very skilled interpreters who can follow, doesn't matter which language, very, very quickly. If they're using signed exact English, they only have to know the signs for each word and be able to produce them that quickly. ASL, I try to use that grammar more. And when I'm doing something called SimCom, which is what we're doing here, speaking and signing at the same time, my ASL grammar suffers a little bit, and also my English grammar suffers a little bit. And I try, for the benefit of the deaf, to force my English to suffer more than my ASL, but it doesn't always happen.
What's a good example of the difference in ASL grammar?
Oh. Can we come back to that?
Yeah.
I have to think.
No, that's right. Now, so another on the difficulties. What are some of the challenges of signing certain theological or doctrinal ideas, and their abstraction and the depth and breadth of meaning and specialized vocabulary? So, what special challenges does theology bring along?
One of the things is expanding or scaffolding. Sometimes we can use one of those initialized signs, and maybe a person knows the word, maybe they don't know the word. But you can use the initialized signs for separating kind of shades of meaning between synonyms. Specialized for theology, again, that goes back to, well, different denominations, different religions have different meanings for the same word. So one of the things, being Lutheran and emphasizing the doctrine and the teaching of the church, as well as the grace of God and his gifts to us, like we would say right away that God chose us, and his name he put on us when we were baptized. People of the Baptist denomination often will have and I don't remember the sign exactly. Is it a cross on the heart or so, like when you invited Jesus into your heart, as what I don't remember, but that's what the sign conveys. And so different shades of meaning can, make a whole different meaning when it's translated. If you don't have the signs for a specific denomination, or don't have the understanding of how that denomination uses the English word.
How much of your signs of the lessons do you pre-plan?
I read through the lessons. It's nice if I know them ahead of time, and I should, because we use the standardized lectionary, which is the readings set up for the church here, but I don't often do that. Usually I'll read them through once or twice, have a few minutes to think through them. Maybe there's some difficult phrases that if I know it's coming up, I can be prepared to sign the abstraction instead of the English words. But usually it just depends on reading through them one or two times and knowing when there's a lot of names coming up.
that has to do with this next question. This is a lot of these questions are Dr. Ochterberg's. Most of these here, who you can hear his personality. Here's one of them. Do you realize at the beginning of a long list of Old Testament names, does a slight touch of panic set in? Is there ever such a situation where you've thrown up your hands in surrender?
Not usually. If that happens and the reading is going along pretty quickly and it's not going to wait for me, then often what I'll have to do is just eliminate one or two of the names in the middle of the line. It's like, okay, get rid of that.
Yeah.
Because while you're spelling the name and listening at the same time, you want to make sure you try and spell the name right. But also, you can only hold so many things in your brain at the same time.
I've noticed that for finger spelling, it's like the first and the second letters are the most important ones. So you a little bit slower, and then
That could be the case.
Some people have commented on emails and phone conversations, watching especially your signing, Aaron, that your style has a fluid precision absent in so much of the signing in TV news programs, like hurricane announcements and stuff. Could you talk about that?
Yeah, well, one thing is I picked up my signing not from classwork, but mostly from the community. And so I have maybe a little bit more natural style than some other interpreters. I don't know what the hiring policies are for news agencies or governmental bodies, if they just get the first one they can find, or if they have some on staff, because there are different ways to hire interpreters. You can't be staff, and like the deaf actress Marlee Matlin has, I believe, her own like personal interpreter, so he knows her signing patterns very well. And voice for others, or children from deaf parents who have become certified. Others just start learning sign language at college or later. And so, but there are also different situations. Sometimes if you'll see me interpreting, like especially the prayers for the church, pastors, like during a normal Sunday, not during this coronavirus outbreak, but so pastors facing the altar, and the speakers are in the pews, and so the sound is going away and I'm in the middle, so it's a lot quieter and harder to hear. And so I want to give a lot of interpreters who are doing that in a newsroom or a press conference the benefit of the doubt, and say maybe they're struggling to hear. On another note, I saw an interpreter just yesterday and yesterday is not going to mean anything in YouTube land. Gotcha. But just recently, it's 2020 and COVID's around, and Hurricane Laurel just hit Louisiana. My parents live in East Texas, and their house showed up on the news during the hurricane preparations because they were putting up boards over the windows. And in that same video clip, they had an announcement from, I don't know who it was, mayor, governor, but somebody was making an announcement about Houston and evacuations from Houston. And I noticed that interpreter did really well with his ASL grammar, probably even more strong ASL than I use. And it was not English, and his facial expressions were good. And they're not always called facial expressions either. They're called non-manual markers, or NMMs. I learned that after I was already certified as an interpreter, instead of in classes. So I don't know if mine always match the grammar specifically, but they help show my communicating. Also, interpreters are supposed to match the tone and style to the best of their ability, the person who is speaking, because they're relaying information. So it would be total conflict if someone is saying, hurry up, get out of your homes, and the interpreter's like, hurry up, get out of your homes.
Right.
And so their interpreters try to match the style and tone of a person speaking. And so their expressions could be different depending on the tone of the person. But also a newsroom or a press conference could be a very noisy place where it's hard to hear and focus on what you're trying to say.
Is it so? 3 more questions. Dr. Ochterberg writes, has Jennifer ever offered critique on your signing? Your wife, Jennifer, who's deaf.
Yes, she does, and my signing style follows her signing style pretty closely because I met her after I had only had like 2 semesters of ASL 1. And she was probably the reason I got involved at the Deaf Church in St. Louis, and hung out with those people for a while, and started learning from them. But she's the closest one to me, and so I learned the most probably from her. And sometimes she'll offer me criticism, but other times she sort of boosts my ego with comments saying, oh, you would be a better interpreting for this situation than that professional interpreter that was hired. So I get it both ways, the positive and the negative.
Nice. So, okay, the goal of ASL is same with speaking, which happen in time, is to transfer ideas and meaning from one brain to another. So what are some of the variable elements of signing that help the ASL observer to apprehend the text at a deeper and more comprehensive level of meaning? And I think that there's a lot of ways to go at this question, but some of it could be just, it's not only your hands, but your face and your body and your attitude, your whole posture. You're communicating with everything.
Yes, and while a lot of hearing people and researchers will say that, over 70 or over 90% of what happens in a conversation is not the words themselves, but the observation of body language. Mm-hmm. And that's how I was interpreting the question. I wasn't.
Yeah. So the different ways of communicating meaning.
Different ways for communicating.
I think I was thinking about this, and I'll end with this question. Is
okay.
My friend, Dr. Kleinig in Australia, said that he thinks that every preacher should learn ASL or sign language because it makes him a better preacher. But on that, and for you, if people are watching, because it's one of my hopes that that all the people who watch our service videos, that they want to learn how to play the organ, or they want to learn ASL. That some of the things that we're putting into the service videos bring people closer to that. So, for the people who want to start learning ASL, to the pastors who wonder about starting a deaf ministry. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, my thoughts about that are start hanging out with deaf people. Yeah, that's how I picked up the languages and some of the details, nuance that you couldn't get in a class, no matter how skilled your professor is. You see communication in action, and imitate it.
Yeah. And so I've just started, and I'm really just started learning ASL, and I know like 20 words.
20 words.
20 words, but there's joy in it, right? There's a delight in learning this too, and it's been wonderful. Some of the things for me, like for example, the sign for salvation is wonderful. Salvation or resurrection. The sign itself preaches, so that's great. Well, Aaron, thanks for this. Thanks for all your insight, and thank you for all your hard work making this stuff, all the signs work for all the services. I know I'm grateful for it, and everyone who watches is grateful. People always email me and say, it's more fun watching Aaron preach than listening to you preach. So that's great. So thanks for all your work. And if you guys have more questions for Aaron, we'll do a part 2 and get them on here too. And if you have any questions about ASL or deaf ministry, then please don't hesitate to reach out. Delighted to talk with you all more about it. All right. Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome.